Hey, it starts with something small, then everything shifts. Stay with me. This one gets real fast. Hit subscribe if you want more stories like this, and let's get into it. I was halfway through wiping down the baseboards in the hallway when I realized it was the 12th. That meant flowers. I checked the reminder on my phone, already snoozed twice. I grabbed my keys, jogged down the stairs, and drove to the same florist I'd used every month for the last 6 years. I always ordered in advance. Lark liked consistency, but the order hadn't gone through this time. Card glitch or something. The florist gave me that look, like she felt bad for me, and threw in an extra rose. I drove home smelling like apology. Quick note, before we start, share in the comments which city or country you're joining from. And let's continue. Lark was already dressed for her work dinner when I got back. Black dress, pearl earrings, hair smoothed down like a news anchor. She glanced at the bouquet, gave me a smile that didn't touch her eyes, and said, "Cutting it a little close today, huh?" I kissed her cheek, didn't say anything. Just handed over the flowers, same as always. She held them like a trophy and took a picture for her Instagram. Caption already in her drafts, probably. Something like, "Steady love from my steady man." I wasn't trying to be perfect. I just didn't want to be the guy who forgot, that's all. My name's Rowan. I'm 38. I live in Meridian, Idaho, about 20 minutes outside Boise. I work as a clinic coordinator for a surgical center, and until recently, I thought I had a pretty normal life. Lark liked things documented. The house, the flowers, the brunches with her mom. All of it had to be posted, framed, and tagged. On the outside, people said we looked like a stable couple. Lark's word, not mine. But at home, there were rules. None of them written down, but all of them enforced. Text when I leave work. Call when I arrive. Don't make plans without running them by her first. Tess, my younger sister, was the only one who saw through it. She'd ask why I skipped our fishing trip again, or why I never stayed more than 20 minutes when I dropped by. I'd shrug and say, "Busy weekend." She'd nod, but I could tell she didn't buy it. Sunday dinners were mandatory. Lark's mom, Maris, hosted them like a royal court. Everything was catered, stiff, and lemon-scented. Maris talked about order. She talked about obedience. I'd eat in silence while Lark gripped my knee under the table like she was reminding me who I belonged to. The only place I could breathe was the clinic. Bryn Slater worked 3 desks over and knew how to read people. She was the first to notice when I started double-checking everything, like I was afraid to get caught being myself. Final straw? Not even close. But looking back, that was the start of it. The moment when my perfect little schedule started feeling like a cage. I took out the trash after dinner and stood outside longer than I needed to, just to have 5 minutes where nobody was watching. When I came back in, Lark was at her laptop at the kitchen table, the screen angled away from me. I caught the words, "How to Train Your Husband Like a Dog," sitting in the search bar before she closed the lid. No scramble, no guilty laugh. Just that smooth, practiced click, like I'd walked in on her paying bills. I didn't say anything the next day. I couldn't figure out how. Every time I thought about the search bar on that laptop, my brain just locked up. It wasn't just what she looked up. It was how cleanly she'd closed the screen, how calm she'd been, like I'd walked in on her vacuuming instead of reading How to Train a Husband Like a Dog. She kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work. I stood there in the kitchen, pretending to scroll through my phone, not even reading. My stomach was tight like I'd swallowed something wrong. 2 days later, she moved the phone charger into the laundry room, just said it was more convenient. That's where she started taking calls, short ones, low voice. Then she'd walk back out smiling, like she'd just hung up on Santa Claus. I asked who it was one evening, just casual, while we were doing dishes. She said it was clinic stuff, even though she didn't work at a clinic. She worked for a marketing group that handled accounts for lifestyle brands, but I let it go. That same week, she told me we needed to sync up better on our spending. Said she'd been thinking about financial transparency and wanted us to try a rule. No personal purchases over $40 without checking in. Said it was about building trust. I didn't argue, but it stuck under my skin. I'd been managing my own bills since I was 18. Now I was texting to see if I could buy a new pair of work shoes. And when I brought that up, she smiled and said, "It's not about control, babe. It's about respect." Sundays with Maris got worse. That woman never raised her voice, but her words hit like brass knuckles. She told a story one night about a catering client, some real estate guy who let his wife spend like crazy and lost everything. Maris cut her fork through a piece of salmon and said, "A man who won't lead ends up led. Peace costs obedience." She said it looking straight at me, like I was the student in detention. I didn't answer. I just kept eating. My jaw was tight the whole night. Tess texted me later that week asking to grab coffee. Nothing heavy, just catch up. I told Lark about it while she was folding towels. Her face didn't move much, but I saw it. The half-second of tension before she said, "Sure, if you've got time." The next night, she circled back to it, asked why Tess suddenly needed me. Then she said, "It's just weird how she always gets in our business." A minute later, she added, "Sometimes I think your sister wants you all to herself." I didn't respond. She knew that would rattle me, and it did. Then Clay started showing up. Maris had him moving a busted freezer out of storage one day. Another time, he patched the backyard fence. Always quiet, polite, head down. Seemed like the kind of guy who'd apologize for standing too close to his own car. I said hey to him once while he was reattaching a gutter. He barely looked up, just nodded and said, "Almost done, sir." "Sir, seriously." Lark acted like he didn't exist. She handed him envelopes like she was donating to a cause and said things like, "Appreciate it," before walking back inside. When I asked what she was paying him, she said, "It's not your lane. I'm handling it." I thought about pushing, but I didn't. That's what it had turned into, me picking my battles like I was dealing with a fragile system that might explode if I asked the wrong question. Anytime I did push back, she'd hit me with a monologue about her stress load, about how she carried the emotional weight, how I didn't recognize everything she did behind the scenes. The speeches got longer, more polished, like she'd practiced. That's the thing with Lark. She didn't yell, she didn't need to. She talked in a way that made you feel guilty just for having your own opinion. By the time she was done listing everything she did for us, I'd forget what I'd even brought up in the first place. I stopped checking her tone. I started checking mine. I'd pause before speaking, weigh my words, make sure I didn't sound agitated. It was like living inside someone else's script, and somehow I'd convinced myself that's just what marriage was. That Friday, I stayed late at the clinic even though I didn't need to, just sat in the break room eating a vending machine granola bar because it was the only place I didn't feel managed. The following Monday, I sat in my truck outside the clinic longer than usual. Engine running, heat barely keeping up with the cold. I was scrolling without thinking when the banking app notification popped up. Transfer completed, $3,700. Memo, services. I frowned and opened it. At first, the name didn't land. Then it clicked hard enough to make my grip tighten on the phone. Rourke. Clay Rourke. I read it again, like maybe I'd missed something. Same result. Same number. Same clean little label like it was normal. My coffee sat in the cup holder, untouched, steam gone. I didn't even remember buying it. That night, I didn't dance around it. Lark was setting plates on the table, moving like everything in the world made sense. I stood there and said, "Why did you send Clay $3,700? She didn't flinch, didn't even pause, just adjusted a fork and said, "He's been helping my mom with logistics. It's easier if I just handle it directly." I stepped closer. "That's not easier. That's you moving money I didn't even know about." She finally looked at me, calm as ever. "Rowan, why are you making this ugly?" "I'm asking a basic question," I said. "It's our account." She sighed like I'd disappointed her. "You've been on edge lately. Suspicious. It's not a good look." I felt my jaw tighten. "Don't flip this on me." "I'm not flipping anything," she said, still soft. "I'm telling you how it comes across. People notice when you spiral." That word stuck. Spiral. Like I was already losing control and she was just documenting it. I didn't push further, not because I agreed, but because I could feel the conversation slipping into that same fog where nothing I said would land clean. I sat down and ate dinner like it was normal, even though nothing about it felt normal anymore. 2 days later, my clinic director called me into her office. She shut the door behind me, which she never did unless something was wrong. Her desk was spotless, but she looked like she hadn't slept. "There's going to be a compliance review," she said. "We've got inconsistencies in supply counts, high-value items, implant kits, sterile trays." I frowned. "Okay, and your role touches scheduling and access," she said carefully. "I'm not accusing you of anything, but your name is on some of the documentation." That landed heavy. I wasn't inventory, I wasn't clinical, but I was connected to enough systems that if something went sideways, I'd be easy to point at. I nodded slowly. "So what does that mean?" "It means cooperate fully," she said, "and don't talk about this with anyone." Too late for that. Bryn caught me in the hallway right after. She kept her voice low, eyes flicking around like she didn't want to be seen standing still. "I've been noticing weird stuff," she said. "Sign-out sheets that don't match. Handwriting changes halfway through." I stared at her. "That could be anything." She shook her head. "And your badge scanned last Thursday in the supply corridor." "I called out sick last Thursday." "I know," she said, almost whispering now. "That's why I'm telling you." I felt something cold settle in my chest. That's not possible. I'm telling you what I saw, she said. Then she stepped back. I shouldn't even be saying this. People are nervous. Nobody wants attention right now. She walked off before I could respond, leaving me standing there with that same tight feeling from the car, only worse. At home, everything shifted again. Lark was suddenly warm, not loud about it, just attentive. She had my favorite stew on the stove, the kind that takes hours. She touched my shoulder when I walked in, said, "You look exhausted," like she actually cared. I didn't trust it. We ate. She asked about my day, listened without interrupting. Then, like it was part of the same conversation, she slid a folder across the table. "Just some paperwork," she said. "Refinance stuff. It's routine. Protects us long term." I opened it. Pages of forms, legal language, numbers. "I need time to read this," I said. Her smile stayed in place, but it felt thinner. "Of course. Take your time." After that, she didn't argue. She didn't push. She just went quiet in a way that filled the whole house, moving around, cleaning, existing, but every second felt like I was being measured. That night, I couldn't sleep. My brain kept looping. Clay, the money, Bryn's warning, those forms sitting on the table. When I heard the shower turn on, I got up. I told myself I was just checking something simple, that I wasn't crossing a line, that I needed clarity. Her laptop was on the desk. I opened it. No password, just sitting there open to me. I searched her files and found a folder buried under downloads, articles, dozens of them. Titles like Narcissistic Husbands, Financial Control Patterns, How to Document Emotional Instability. I scrolled through them, my chest getting tighter with each one. It wasn't random reading, it was a collection, organized, like evidence. I closed the laptop right before the water shut off and went back to bed, staring at the ceiling until morning. Late the next morning, a delivery from the florist showed up anyway, boxed, tagged, and timed like the order had never glitched at all. My phone buzzed a minute later. A text from Lark. "Don't forget to smile today. People are watching." I stood there in the kitchen, staring at the flowers on the counter and the unopened box by the door, and felt something shift hard inside me. I picked up my keys and walked out the door without touching them. They took my badge that Monday right before lunch. 2 people from corporate showed up out of nowhere. 1 man, 1 woman, both in pressed shirts, both holding clipboards like they were about to take inventory of me. A uniformed officer stood near the check-in desk, not saying a word, just watching. Nobody explained that part. They didn't have to. I got called into the small conference room by the admin office. The temperature in there always ran cold, but this time it felt like a freezer. The guy asked me about access logs. The woman asked about override permissions. They had printouts, timestamps, my login in bold. I told them I didn't make those entries. They didn't argue. They just wrote it down like they were logging excuses. The guy said, "We've seen this pattern before." I looked between them. "You think I'm stealing surgical kits?" "We're just gathering information," the woman said. "You'll have a chance to respond through proper channels." By noon, they had me clear out my things. No yelling, no scene. Just a silent walk to the parking lot, clipboard lady a step behind me the whole time. Bryn saw it. She was at the nurse's station when I passed. Her eyes dropped fast. She didn't say a word, and I couldn't even blame her. Everyone looked scared, like this thing was contagious. I didn't go home right away. I drove around for an hour, then pulled into a gas station and sat there until the sun dipped behind the strip mall. My hands were shaking by the time I got back. The driveway looked the same. The porch light clicked on like normal, but when I walked inside, I knew something had changed. Lark met me at the door with that same careful expression she always wore in public, concerned, measured, softly polite. There were 2 people already sitting on the couch, one older man in plain clothes, heavy face, eyes like cement, and a younger woman with sharp cheekbones and a tight ponytail who didn't even look at me. The man stood. "Detective Hartley Knox," he said. "This is Detective Adrian Sloan. We're following up on an active investigation." I didn't sit down. "What kind of investigation?" "Professional misconduct," Knox said. "Theft of surgical supplies. We'd like to ask you a few questions and collect any relevant devices." Sloan finally looked at me, her face neutral, maybe even curious. She didn't say anything yet. Lark stepped in with 2 glasses of water like she was hosting a garden party. "Of course," she said. "We want to be helpful." "We." She touched my arm lightly, performed concern. "Rowan's been under stress," she told them. "He's been obsessive lately, with schedules, routines. It's been hard." I turned and stared at her. "Are you kidding me?" Sloan raised an eyebrow. Knox just wrote something down. Lark kept going. He hasn't been sleeping well. Fixates. It's like he doesn't know how to stop. I stood still, trying to figure out if I'd been dropped into some kind of rehearsal I didn't know I'd been cast in. Knox asked for my phone and my laptop. I gave them both over, hands numb. They didn't cuff me. Not yet. They left with a receipt slip and zero reassurance. Just a "we'll be in touch." Later, I found out Lark called my parents right after they left, said she was worried, that I was breaking down, making irrational decisions, that she was trying to keep things from getting worse. She framed it like love, like she was protecting me. 2 mornings later, I sat in my truck outside the clinic, still holding on to this fantasy that someone, somewhere, would say this was all a mistake. Then the sheriff's car pulled in behind me, lights off. I didn't run, didn't argue, just got out and held out my wrists when they asked. They booked me into Ada County Jail on charges that sounded like a death sentence in slow motion. Fraud, theft, breach of trust, professional endangerment. Knox kept saying it was straightforward. Sloan didn't say much, but I caught the look on her face. She wasn't convinced. At intake, I asked if I could call my wife. They let me. She didn't answer. 20 minutes later, I got a text from her instead. "I can't talk while you're emotional. We'll handle this the right way, like there was any version of this that was right." At the hearing the next morning, Sadie leaned in and whispered, "They're using your flower deliveries." "What?" She slid a note toward me. It was from Lark's interview. She'd told them the flowers weren't romantic. They were monitoring behavior, public signals, control mechanisms. That was when the truth landed, hard and undeniable. This wasn't some misunderstanding. It wasn't about a stolen tray or a login error. This was a removal. I wasn't being accused, I was being erased. Tessa's words stayed with me after she left. "You don't get to disappear." I held on to that like a rope, because everything else felt like the ground was setting around me. Jail isn't loud in a normal way. It's doors slamming, keys clinking, men coughing, yelling, flushing, pacing. Light never goes off. It just hums overhead like a migraine you can't blink away. My uniform was 2 sizes off, stiff at the collar, loose in the waist. My mattress felt like the inside of a trunk. I folded my blanket into a square and used it to keep my back from touching the cold wall. Gus Redding was already in the cell when I got placed. Mid-40s, but looked older, gray at the temples, skin like leather, permanent squint. He didn't ask what I did. He just said, "Keep your voice calm. Don't beg anybody for anything." Then he went back to reading a crossword someone had smuggled in with toothpaste on the corners. The next morning I called my parents. My mom answered on the second ring. "Rowan." Her voice was soft, like she didn't want to wake something up. I opened my mouth, but before I could say anything, I heard Lark's voice in the background, calm, steady, rehearsed. My mom must have had me on speaker. My dad cut in. "What did you do?" "Not what happened. Not we're here." "What did I—" "Rowan," he said. "Men don't end up in trouble like this unless they're careless. What did you do?" I couldn't even respond. I looked at the scratched-up table in front of me and felt something collapse inside my chest. "She's trying her best," my mom said gently. "Lark's just trying to keep the peace through this." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. Then I sat there and stared at the wall until the buzzer signaled lunch. 3 days later, Sadie Bloom walked into the visitation room carrying a legal pad and a bag under each eye. She looked like she hadn't slept since Halloween. She didn't sugarcoat anything. "Accusations like yours go down smooth," she said. "They sound believable. Middle-aged guy, medical access, weird transactions. The system loves a clean narrative." I asked if she thought we had a shot. She shrugged. "It's early, but you've got someone working it on the outside." I blinked. "Who?" "Your sister. Tess." That hit harder than I expected. I nodded. "She's the only one asking questions." Sadie leaned forward. "And you need to be straight with me. No sugarcoating. If there's anything in your background that even smells messy, money, relationships, petty stuff, I need to know now." I told her everything. She wrote it all down. Before she left, she paused like she was weighing how much to tell me. Then she said, "Lark's already talking about a plea deal, something that won't put you in jail, just treatment, therapy, financial management, but you'd lose your license. No more clinic work, no reapplication." I nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "So, a soft execution." Sadie didn't argue. A couple days later, Lark finally visited. Behind glass, no warmth. She wore a soft sweater and makeup like she was posing for sympathy. She leaned in, hands folded like a prayer, and said she was trying to save me. "If you just admit you've made some mistakes," she said, The court might be lenient. I stared at her. Why did you send Clay that money? Her mouth didn't move, but her eyes sharpened, tight, controlled, surgical. I told you to stop chasing conspiracies, she said quietly. You're not thinking clearly. You're building a story where I'm the villain. She leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. Men who fight this make it worse for themselves. Then she stood up, smoothed her sweater, and walked out like she'd just dropped off a casserole. That night, Gus looked over at me while we ate lukewarm beef stew from divided trays. That wasn't love, he said. That was management. I didn't answer. But yeah, coming from him, it landed. Tess came the next week. She walked into the visiting room like she was on a mission, no makeup, hair in a ponytail, a spiral notebook in her hand. She sat down, looked me in the eye, and said, I don't care if this place smells like bleach and fear. We're doing this. She didn't ask if I did it. She asked about access logs, timestamps, who handled what inventory. She asked about Clay, Maris, what kind of paperwork had changed hands. She scribbled everything I said into that notebook, flipping pages fast, already building something I couldn't see yet. I told her the parts I knew, the parts I guessed, and the parts I only felt in my gut. She didn't flinch, she just nodded like she was plugging numbers into an equation. Then she stood, pressed her hand against the glass, and said, Okay, then we follow the paper. She turned to go, but paused before walking out. You don't get to disappear, Rowan, she said. Not on my watch. And for the first time since they slammed that cell door shut, I believed maybe I wouldn't. 2 weeks after that, Tess came back looking like she'd been living in a war room, hair pulled back tight, the same hoodie she'd worn in college when she used to cram for forensic exams, a notebook in one hand and a manila folder stuffed with papers in the other. She didn't say hello. She sat down across from the glass and said, Okay, I need you focused. I leaned in. I'm listening. She opened the folder and flipped to a printout. First thing is the money. I tracked account activity from 2 weeks before your arrest. You had 4 withdrawals that make no sense. 9,600, 14,250, 7,900, and then one giant pull that wiped the savings clean. Total? 58,640 gone. I stared at her. Gone where? Some of it split into 3 new accounts I didn't even know existed. The last one, big chunk, got transferred into a holding account in Lark's name, then rerouted. To who? She didn't look up from the page. Clay Rourke. I let that sit for a second. Then I asked, How do you even find this stuff? Tess finally looked at me. Because I assume people lie, but paper doesn't. She flipped to the next section. Second hit, your house. A quitclaim deed was filed 3 weeks before you got arrested. It removes your name from the title. Recorded with a mobile notary you've never met. I pulled the stamp and the credentials. You didn't sign that paper, Rowan. I didn't even know a quitclaim was happening. No, because it wasn't supposed to be on your radar. Her jaw clenched. People do ugly stuff when they think you won't check. She turned the page again. Third hit, new line of credit tied to the house. 27,500 draw, electronically signed. Looks like your signature, but it's not. I let out a breath. Where to go? 2 small payments to what looks like consulting invoices. The rest, right back to Clay Rourke, through a shell vendor called CR Property Solutions, which doesn't even have a website. I leaned back, head buzzing. Oh, and Maris, Tess said like it was dessert. Her catering company took a private loan earlier this year, $68,000. Some of that money ended up sloshing around through joint accounts tied to Lark. Can you prove intent? Not yet, but the timing's cleaner than a crime scene. Meanwhile, Sadie kept pushing discovery requests. Every time she came to see me, she brought summaries of the prosecution interviews. Lark told them I was obsessed with order, that I monitored her movements, that I had episodes. Sadie showed me a line where Lark said I was fixated on rules like he couldn't breathe without a checklist. Maris backed her up, called me a well-meaning but rigid man. She said I didn't leave room for leadership, and quoted something I never said. A husband keeps the structure, the wife keeps the house. Bryn went quiet for almost a month. I figured she was scared, and I didn't blame her, but then Tess told me she reached out, quietly, carefully. Bryn told Tess she remembered something from the day my badge supposedly scanned in. She'd been grabbing a clipboard near the supply room and saw someone tall, wearing a beanie, definitely not me, walk in like he was trying to move fast, but not draw attention. She didn't recognize the guy, but he made her nervous. I asked, why didn't she say that earlier? Tess shrugged. She was scared. You were already gone. People go silent when they think they might be next. And that guy, the one with the beanie, fit Clay's description better than mine. Clay wasn't tall by NBA standards, but taller than me, built thinner, always looked like he was watching for the next problem. Tess dug deeper. Tracked down social media tied to Clay's wife, Mina. She had a private account but still posted. One post showed a hospital bill in the background and said something about being 3 months behind. Another talked about needing a miracle. Tess looked me dead in the eye through the glass. That's the kind of pressure people exploit. I couldn't do anything from my cell, obviously. Couldn't research or log in or file motions. But Tess filled the gap. Every week she showed up with more. She read me bank logs, pulled my tax returns, and started mapping dates to the hour. Sadie would slide case notes under the plastic divider. I'd read them, make my marks, hand them back. Then Tess warned me about something new. Lark hired a civil attorney, she said. Kit Rowe, he's good, fast. They've already filed divorce paperwork and property claims. She's moving like she knows you're stuck in here. I sat back and ran my hand over my face. This isn't just a fight, Tess said. It's a machine, criminal charges to bury your name, civil case to take your stuff, and a motion to make sure no one cares what's true. She stood to leave, her notebook already flipped to a clean page. But here's the thing about machines, she said. Once you understand the wiring, you can break it. Sadie slid the folder across the plastic divider and tapped the top page. This is the first person who's acting like the timeline matters. It was a report from Detective Adrienne Sloan. Clean layout, clear summary, no drama, just dates, access logs, geolocation pings, metadata, real work. I flipped through it slowly while Sadie leaned back and said, "She's not buying the simple story." Knox had never looked past the surface. To him, I was just another midlife spiral, burned out, careless, snapping under pressure. He didn't care if the math made sense, but Sloan started asking questions that didn't fit the narrative. Where was my phone during the time the clinic system logged me in? Why did the badge scans cluster in patterns that looked like scripts? Why were the flagged entries tied to days I was off shift or logged out in other parts of the building? She didn't argue with Knox in meetings. She just kept pulling threads. Quietly, patiently. Sadie told me Sloan pushed for cloud-level subpoenas. Not just the stuff on my personal devices, but deep data. Login traces, backup records, synced locations, Wi-Fi pings. That kind of paperwork doesn't come fast. While it crawled through the system, I sat in my cell and tried to hold on to whatever piece of myself hadn't been rewritten. Mid-January came. Cold, dead light through the window. Food that tasted like it had given up. My body moved through the same motions. Stand up, line up, eat, wait. But my brain started to drift. That's when plea deals start to look like lifeboats. Then Sadie came in with a different look on her face. Not hopeful exactly, just sharper. Mina Rourke reached out, she said. I sat up straighter. To you? She said she couldn't stay quiet anymore. Clay came home with cash he couldn't explain and started acting sick about it. She found deleted messages, but saved a few voicemails. Sadie pulled out a transcript. It wasn't technical. It didn't mention the clinic. But it showed pressure. Lark telling Clay to stick to the timeline. Maris saying things like, no half measures. Clay asking if he'd still get paid if it didn't end quick. My chest burned reading those lines, the cold kind of burn, the kind that comes when everything you feared starts connecting. Sloan brought Bryn in again. This time Bryn talked. She admitted she'd seen forms filled out after hours, ink drying on pages that should have been locked in already. She said she saw a man she didn't recognize use a badge at the supply room door. She hadn't wanted to get involved, but it had been eating at her. Sloan lined up Mina's voicemails, Bryn's statement, and the transfers Tess tracked. The picture changed from maybe to, how did nobody catch this sooner? The report Sloan wrote next wasn't a maybe. It forced the room to reset. When it hit Prosecutor Marin Wiley's desk, Sadie said the tone shifted fast. Wiley had pushed for a plea at first. She liked neat wins, but now she was asking questions. That meant pressure. That meant cracks. The biggest shift came from the cloud backups. Sloan got access to shared devices and billing-connected accounts, stuff Lark thought she controlled, but shared data is tricky. It doesn't delete the way people think it does. Sloan pulled message threads from Lark's backup, real words, full sentences, no hiding behind interpretation. Lark, we break him through scandal. Men don't recover from that. Maris, secure the house before he knows what's happening. Lark, his structure is the weakness. Routine equals exposure. Push there. There was nothing emotional in those messages, no pain, no regret, just strategy, just moves. When Sadie showed me the screenshots in a small conference room behind the county courthouse, my hands curled into fists without meaning to. Tess sat next to me. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her whole body was locked still, jaw clenched, eyes scanning every word like she was memorizing it. Sadie flipped the last page and said, "This is where it flips." It wasn't relief I felt. It was cold recognition that this whole thing had been built piece by piece, that the marriage I'd defended, apologized for, worked to save, it wasn't the same marriage Lark was living in. She didn't want partnership. She wanted positioning, and she'd built an entire exit ramp out of my bones. Tess stood first. "So we push this uphill." I nodded. I didn't say thank you. I didn't have the words for it. But I looked Sadie in the eye and said, "Let's go." Sadie showed up just after breakfast, same courthouse visitor badge clipped to her coat, but her face looked different this time, exhausted, but with something behind it. Satisfaction, maybe, or justice in a cheap wrapper. She sat down, pulled a folded copy of the dismissal motion from her bag, and slid it toward me. "Marin Wiley filed to drop the charges," she said. "New evidence, integrity concerns." I stared at the paper. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel clean. Just a dull thud behind my ribs, like a machine switching off after months of running too hot. They processed my release that same day. I signed the forms, handed back the ID band, and changed into the same county-issued clothes I'd been arrested in. The pants didn't fit right. The shirt still smelled faintly like jail soap and plastic. They gave me a clear plastic bag with my things, wallet, phone, keys. I held the phone like it belonged to someone else. It had battery but no charge left in it, just like me. When I stepped outside, the sky looked grayer than I remembered. Wind sharp, snow crusted to the edges of the sidewalk. Tess was there, coat zipped up to her neck, knit hat pulled low, fists in her pockets. Her face was tight, tight with cold, tight with fury, tight like she hadn't relaxed in weeks. She didn't say anything, just stepped forward and hugged me so hard it knocked the air out of my lungs. I didn't fight it. The ride back to Meridian was quiet. My voice still hadn't come back. Everything felt louder than it was. Cars passing, tires on salt, the turn signal clicking like a metronome in a song I didn't know anymore. We pulled into my driveway. I stared at the garage keypad like it was a math problem. "Code's not working," I said. Tess didn't even look surprised. She got out and walked to the mailbox, pulled out a manila envelope and held it up. "Note from Kit Rowe," she said. "Lark's attorney. Claims she fears erratic behavior, wants all contact through counsel." I didn't laugh, but Tess did, one sharp breath of disbelief. Then she crumpled the note and threw it back in the box. "She's still running the same play," she said. "Control the narrative, make you look unstable so the facts don't matter." My job was gone. Even though the charges were dropped, the clinic didn't want the heat. I got a notice from the board saying they still needed to hold a professional conduct hearing because accusation alone warranted review. So now I had to fight to prove I deserved the career I'd already built. That night, I moved into a tiny apartment near the Boise Bench. One bedroom, thin walls, nothing on the floor but my bag and the legal folder Tess had handed me. I sat with my back against the wall, legs stretched out, and let the silence hit me. No dinner expectations, no check-ins, no reminders, nobody telling me to smile. Tess stopped by the next day with groceries and her laptop. She handed me a name scribbled on a sticky note, Dr. Elsie Tan. "You need to talk to someone who doesn't want anything from you," she said. I didn't argue, but I didn't rush either. I didn't want therapy. I wanted a reset button, but Dr. Tan didn't treat me like I was broken. She treated me like someone who'd been trained to ignore his own instincts. She didn't ask how I felt. She asked when I first overrode what I felt. It hit harder than anything the system threw at me. Meanwhile, the storm kept rolling. Divorce filings, property disputes, requests for protective orders dressed up as safety precautions. And Lark, still out there, feeding her version of the story to anyone who'd listen. Friends, neighbors, people at her gym. It felt like I was living in a house fire that everyone thought was a renovation. That's when Tess said, "We've been playing defense too long." I looked at her. "What's the plan?" "No yelling," she said. "No drama, just facts, filings, daylight." She leaned forward across the table, eyes locked on mine. "You don't clear your name by screaming. You clear it with receipts. We didn't go to court to win. We went to make sure they didn't walk out like nothing happened. Tess built the financial timeline with the kind of care people use around live wires. She broke it into layers: transfers, draws, false signatures, backdated deeds. She didn't just show where the money went. She showed how it was moved, why it was moved, and what lies had to be told to cover each step. Sadie helped me vet a civil attorney who didn't flinch at messy cases. His name was Gordon Bell. Older guy, plain suits, asked tough questions in a flat voice like he was ordering lunch. First time we met, he said, "You're not here to feel better. You're here to correct the record." Kit Rowe came to represent Lark. Big smile, high-end suit, practiced condescension. He tried to frame it as a bad breakup. Said I was stuck, said Lark had moved on with grace, and I was just trying to punish her for outgrowing the marriage. Depositions changed that tune quick. Under oath, Lark got sloppy. The calm exterior cracked when the dates didn't match up. When Tess dropped the account log showing the $27,500 line of credit with a forged signature, Lark's answers got clipped. She called me slow during her own testimony, like she forgot she was being recorded. Maris tried to talk circles around the questions, same buzzwords: tradition, respect, stability. But when Gordon laid out how $68,000 from her catering business had been loaned, redirected, and partially deposited into the same account that paid Clay Rourke, her tone changed. She stopped preaching, started deflecting. Mina showed up in person. She didn't defend Clay's actions, but she made the pressure clear: rent overdue, a baby with respiratory problems, no savings. She told the court that Clay came home with the envelopes of cash, called it consulting, and couldn't meet her eyes when she asked what it really was. Her honesty mattered. Clay didn't come out looking clean, but he came out looking real. Lark and Maris didn't look desperate. They looked strategic. Clay was a pawn they picked because they knew he needed the money too badly to ask the right questions. Bryn gave a statement. Then she showed up again, this time for the board hearing. She sat in the back for most of it, then walked up, calm and clear, and said, "The scan patterns didn't match Rowan's routine, and I saw backdated entries that made no sense unless someone was trying to build a trail. That was it. No speech, no emotion, just enough to knock the wind out of whatever was left of their case. We didn't make it to trial. Lark and Kit didn't want discovery pushed too far. Too many emails, too many texts, too many people who'd have to go under oath and admit they hadn't checked the story before they repeated it. They offered settlement. Gordon didn't blink. He named a number: $412,000, paid in stages. Part of it tied to Maris's business assets, which meant liens, public ones. Her catering company lost 2 big corporate clients within a month. Lark lost her partnership's job after her own company opened an internal review. Turned out the same language she used to describe me, unbalanced, paranoid, erratic, had shown up in her employee files when people started pulling emails. Funny how fast charming turns into manipulative when the lights flip on. I used part of the settlement to pay down legal bills. Part went to Tess, to cover the hours, the travel, the income she put aside to drag me through the fire and back. And part I set aside for Mina, quietly, through Gordon. No attention, just help. Because if she hadn't spoken up, I'd still be the ghost in a story I didn't write. The real win wasn't the money. It wasn't even the ruined reputations. It was the shift. People who used to look past me started pausing. People who had taken Lark's word as fact now spoke slower, more careful. Apologies didn't come fast, but they came shaped like silence, like hesitation, like maybe I got it wrong. And for the first time since the flowers stopped, she couldn't steer the room anymore. 10 months after they walked me out of the clinic, my life looked like someone had taken a red pen to it. Smaller apartment, older truck, fewer people calling. But I could breathe, and that made it bigger than anything I'd had before. I found work at a small surgical center west of Boise. No drama. No fake smiles. Just clean procedure boards, honest co-workers, and a director who cared more about prep time than appearances. First week on the job, my phone buzzed during lunch, and I jumped like I'd missed curfew. Dr. Tan had warned me that kind of thing would take a while to shake. She was right. Tess came over every other weekend. We didn't talk about the case unless it mattered. We talked about normal things, her work, my truck, some terrible mystery show we got hooked on. She didn't make me feel like a project. She made me feel like a brother again. My parents took longer to face it. When they apologized, it came in half steps. My mom mailing me a recipe I liked, my dad forwarding an article about false accusations with no comment. I didn't let them skip the hard part. I sat across from them one Sunday and said, believing her without asking me almost broke me. My mom cried. My dad looked like he'd swallowed gravel, but they didn't deny it. I stopped sending flowers. Instead, I made a calendar. Real paper, stuck to my fridge. Gym on Mondays. Dinner with Tess every other Thursday. Fishing once a month. Nobody told me when to go. Nobody told me what was important. I ran into Lark at Winco in early October. She was near the apples, phone in one hand, scanning like she was checking prices or people. For a second, I felt the old reaction, heart rate up, eyes looking for exits, but it passed. She saw me, paused like she expected something, an argument, an apology, something dramatic she could spin. I just nodded once, polite, and kept walking. Outside, I sat in my truck for a minute before I drove home. My hands weren't shaking. First time I'd noticed that. I made dinner that night in a kitchen that only had one chair, ate standing up, left the dishes in the sink, and watched a dumb movie with the volume too high. No one corrected me. No one guilted me. People ask about revenge, like they want me to say I enjoyed watching her lose. I didn't. I didn't care. My revenge is this. I'm not managed anymore. I'm not monitored. I'm not bent around someone else's needs. I don't need flowers to prove anything. I know who I am, and no one rewrites my story again. Hold up. Can I ask you something personal before you click away? If your partner tried to control the story and erase you, would you fight to clear your name or walk away to protect your peace? If you've got the hype feature, tap it to support this video and help it reach more people. Then please subscribe and hit like. It's one click and it matters a lot. And drop a comment saying good story or tell me what you do.